Bernelle was a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars. With discipline of steel, he did not tolerate transgressions such as desertion or dishonorable actions toward civilians. Bernelle created an ambulance section, artillery batteries, but things like bring his wife, grandchildren and relatives as assessors, extravagant clothes, the fact that his wife was nicknamed Isabella III as she was frequently given orders. So Bernelle was esteemed as arrogant. As Carlist insurgents were in Navarre, the legion was transferred there. The city of Pamplona had heavy wooded surroundings, vineyards, plantations, shepherds, and wineries around the Greystone city. The legionnaire Jacques Azan was impressed with the details of the city, but these days faded when the legionnaires were sent to the fortress of the Arga Valley in La Haçonha. On March 6, in the village Leranots near Zubiri, legionnaires were protecting the soldiers who were cutting hay. According to Bernelle, suddenly 4 Carlist companies surrounded the town. For a few minutes there were bayonet combat. The shootout only ceased with the arrival of the night. A few weeks later, at 5 a.m. on March 24, legionnaires from the 4th Battalion were sent to climb steep heights overlooking Zubiri to assist a Spanish battalion moving from La Haçonha to Zubiri. Heavy snow and strong winds blurring the horizon. Suddenly the Carlists attacked from all directions. It took some minutes to rearrange formation. The former Swiss Guard Sergeant Samuel Benoit Berset clashed them with a cavalry squadron to assist the legionnaires. They went directly against the Carlist cavalry. Benoit was wounded several times during this battle. Bernelle managed to get the left Carlist flank with the 5th Battalion. When Bernelle found 5 burned legionnaires, he immediately sent 30 Carlist prisoners to the firing squad. On April 25, they received the mission to attack a position with 300 Carlists who were sheltered in Tirapegui, a mountainous region where the Carlists were acting as snipers against a small liberalist fortification. Bernelle sent a company there. The plan was to everyone assemble, but they didn't wait for Bernelle, deciding to attack and were quickly surrounded. Bernelle arrived with 4 cannons and 3 companies, an exchange of fire that endured 6 hours. There were bayonet clashes. 20 legionnaires were killed and 70 wounded. Among them, Bernelle, who was wounded in the arm and got furious with the results. A Corsican lieutenant, Ascanier Alcide Ferrandi, and a small number of soldiers were isolated from the platoon. They sacrificed themselves. Bernelle said that they saw them in trouble but refused to abandon their safe positions. Courage alone was no substitute for intelligence and leadership. Contemporaries consider Bernelle controversial. Despite his ability to lead the legion well, from August 1836 onwards, the differences between the main commanders start to clash. Joseph Konrad, a veteran of the Battle of Macta, began to clash more with Bernelle ideas. Joseph was a German, a man of people, did not wear ornate clothes, and acted as an equal with his comrades. The German legionnaire von Rosen wrote that he was about 50 years old. His kepi had a golden line that against his will was replaced by Bernelle with his tricolor line of the French flag. This reflects the archetype of the legionnaire who fought for bravery and the glory of the regiment, according with the author. While Bernelle was atypical in this respect for the legion because he held nationalist principles. In 1836, when Konrad proposed promotions to fill some vacancies, Bernelle rejected all of them. Konrad asked for temporary excuse from the legion. Bernelle himself also resigned. Jean-Louis Beau was called to substitute Bernelle. Although a Napoleonic War veteran from Battle of Waterloo, he was not the most suitable for the position. He was too intellectual in the midst of a multinational regime contingent whose communication was mostly monosyllabic or by gestures. How could someone wearing a knee-length cape oversized boots and a hat looked like from some circus, would take seriously by them. Lebu, who didn't have a good relation with the legionnaires, resigned. Finally, at the gravest hour in Spain, Joseph Konrad returned. Food shortage was the main reason for desertions. By February, the contingent, 4,000 troops, 2,000 fewer than at their arrival. On March 21, 1837, Konrad led a climb to the heights of Larrañzar, a wooded mountain. According to Jacques Azan, around 10 a.m., the rearguard was struck by an explosion followed by a volley of gunfire from the bushes. Captain Johann Albrecht Hebisch company was isolated near the crest of the mountain. The Carlists surrounded them. Captain Johann was a 40-year-old native of Württemberg, a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, has been wounded several times, but even a military pension was not enough to keep him home. In 1821, he joined the cause of the Greek independence and was also wounded several times. He had contact with the Orleans family, who had given him a place in the legion. He was known for his insults, his drinking habit. His superiors described him as despicable, lazy, and a troublemaker. Only after Michel Combé sent him to prison for 30 days for threatening his comrade with a saber, his behavior improved, but he continued to drink incessantly. On March 21, 1837, he was admired by all for his bravery. The author described him as a type impossible to leave in a garrison, but in an exchange of fire you would almost feel sorry for his adversary. Galant, who wrote a chronicle of the Legion, spoke about Johann's performance on his improvised walls. He remained for 2 hours until Konrad's regiment climbed up the other side to dislodge them. According to Azan, we went into a ravine without a doubt to check if we had support. What saved us was the drummer, whom I asked to play as bayonet attack. The Carlists thought there were more reinforcements around, so they retreated. Still after Larrañzar, Konrad continued to be deeply criticized. In the summer of 1837, the Carlist War was getting to an end. The liberalist general Iribarren was coordinating a spy operation on a large Carlist contingent in the town of Huesca, a joint action of the liberalists with Aquilbazain, who reported that while accompanying the Spanish troops to begin the siege of Huesca on May 24 at dusk, some officers of Iribarren shouted, "The legion goes forward!" The Carlists were awaiting for them with 4 divisions, the second with 4 Alavan battalions and 2 Aragonese, the third with legionnaires who deserted, and cavalry with 11 squadrons. Iribarren started to bombard Carlist positions at 3:15 p.m. The Navarre infantry and full-ran legionnaires advanced as a vanguard. The Guard cuirassiers clashed with Carlist cavalry. The soil was muddy due previous rains. Diego Leon was in charge of the cuirassiers. He died during the charge. Gradually, the liberalists entered the city, where there was a heavy shootout and bayonet combat. Konrad led the legion through the walled gardens. Realizing that the legion was far ahead, the Carlists dug in the rearguard. About 600 Carlists firing at us, reported Galant. Dust caused by impacts of the artillery, which impeded visibility. Iribarren was mortally wounded by a cavalry counterattack, and Konrad began to retreat, taking the wounded that they could with them. At 1 a.m. they settled in a nearby town called Almodóvar with numerous casualties. Iribarren died 1 day after. On June 2nd, Don Carlos and his contingents were preparing lunch in Barbastro. The liberalist general Marcelino Orá, with a force of 18,000, arrived from the west. 800 Carlists crowded in Barbastro. According to Baron Wilhelm von Raden, who served in Don Carlos' cause, the adversaries recognized each other as they approached, gesturing to each other and calling each other by name and nickname. It was a massacre, a brutal bayonet fight. According to Abel Galant, on the far right of the liberalist line, there was a great confusion in the lines. Konrad shouted for them to advance. While advancing, he was hit in the head. His body fell into enemy hands, and some others managed to recover. A cavalry officer lifted his body. Later, General Arispe received a letter telling what happened. Louis Philippe was responsible for Konrad's children, so he placed them in military schools, and his widow received a pension. Of the 800 legionnaires, 160 survived. Withdrawal from the Carlist War, except for some Polish cavalry officers created by Bernelle. Don Carlos ended up signing an armistice, and 20,000 accompanied him to France. The Marshal of France, certain Konrad, reported that Carlists had crossed the Pyrenees to seek refuge in France. The survivors from the Carlist campaign could be considered the Old Legion. These veterans were sent to Algeria.